The recording's in progress. And for those of you who are joining this recording of the presentation just as it began, we covered what policy is. Essentially, policy governs a great many priorities in our civic life, and policies can be set to benefit different people at different times. So how do we affect policy? Well, advocacy is a key way to affect policy. It's the way that we influence decision makers about something that we strongly believe in. It affects our day-to-day lives and work, no matter what we do. Policy helps us bring programs to scale. So if we're the example that that Susan gave earlier in our meeting for early childhood services and support, that's an example of a policy that that worked at some time in the past, can work locally when organizations are connecting families with young children to services and support, but policy at the state level can make this happen statewide and can dedicate state government resources and some of the federal resources that come to the state of Louisiana to allocate toward that end and not toward some other end. Advocacy improves the lives of the people we all serve. Many of us know people who are personally impacted on a daily basis by policy decisions about how programs are structured, how schools are funded, and other components of our state and local governments. Advocacy can help make sure that policies serve the interests of the people that we work for. Advocacy also can help to increase the voice of regular people in our state government. If we're not in great touch with our state representatives, there are other people and other interests that are. And advocacy is a very important way to ensure that government reflects the needs and desires of the people who make it up. Volunteers, donors, and staff at nonprofits want to make a difference. Advocacy can help ensure that the barriers to effectively serving populations that you serve either are reduced or eliminated altogether. They can help push very, very heavy boulders uphill. And frankly, broad scale change requires policy to make it happen. We all know what it's like to work in isolation, to work in a small, in the context of a small institution or small organization working on a very, very big problem. By joining together and advocating together in a focused and concentrated way, we can build much more significant power than is available just through our individual, if very important, work to serve clients directly. Finally, when we're advocating, we're often advocating around how we make our government's systems more fair. And there are three really important principles that I just wanted to share at the beginning of this presentation. Principles of equality, equity, and justice. How many of you are familiar with this slide? I know it's circulated in a lot of contexts. The basic idea here is that equality is where everybody has the same resources. It doesn't matter, everybody has sort of a level playing field in theory, but they may have different resources that they're starting out with. So in this image, you see everybody has the same size box to stand on to see a soccer game over a fence. It doesn't matter whether they're very tall, mid-sized, or short. They get the same box, and if that box isn't enough to ensure that they can see over the fence, well, somebody already provided a box, and that's the end of that. Equity looks not at what's given, but at the outcomes. If one box isn't enough, then resources can be redistributed. So the person who can already see over the fence can still see over the fence without any boxes. The woman who needs one box to see over the fence gets that box, and the child who needs two boxes gets those two boxes, but everybody then has the same capacity to participate, to see the game, to benefit from social policy. Justice removes the barrier entirely. So we are often advocating for equity and justice in the work that we do at the Capitol. So I'm going to go quickly through this slide. And I also want to just give credit again. I know I think I mentioned this before I started recording. Aaron Brock at Feeding Louisiana put a lot of work into developing these slides, and Feeding Louisiana does great work through through both their state organization and their member pantries and food banks to educate and advocate with our legislature every year and every month. And every week and every day. So I just wanted to give credit again to Feeding Louisiana for this really tremendously valuable resource. So when should we advocate? Well, as individuals, we all have decisions to make about when it's appropriate for us to engage with elected officials and with government officials at agencies. We need to think: is this related to our mission? Does this policy affect the people we serve? Can we add value to this conversation? Do we have expertise on the topic? And given our current capacity, how much can we really dedicate to advocacy as part of our work? This is partly a matter of comfort and partly a matter of simply taking a look at what staff time or what individual personal time is available for this sort of engagement. I think as we think about at what level we're able to get involved, the cost-benefit analysis has to include what happens if policies stay the same or get worse. How much harder is our work if nothing changes or if we slide backward? So there's, advocacy doesn't always have a direct payoff, but there are also costs to not engaging. We also need to think about who our allies are, who else in the community is affected, who should we talk to, not just our elected representatives, but who do we know who needs to be involved in these conversations? Too often, conversations at the state level and the municipal level happen without the voices of the people who are going to be affected the most by a particular policy consideration. How can we use our networks and our power to get more people involved and to help them to elevate their own voices? And finally, what geography does this policy impact? If I work in Vermilion Parish and there's a local policy that somebody else is working on in Monroe, it probably doesn't make sense for me to get engaged. The voices of my voices aren't going to matter as much to the local representative that I'm talking to. But if there's a policy that's going to affect the whole state, and my representative is one of the key people who's going to weigh in on that policy, then it may make a lot of sense for me to reach out. Whether the policy affects the people we serve is perhaps the key consideration in thinking about what it means to get involved or not to get involved. And I just wanted to share a quick slide indicating that Advocacy Works. This is from a poll of congressional staffers conducted and published in 2011, indicating that in-person, at least for Washington politicians, in-person visits from constituents have the highest amount of influence on the decision of a politician who isn't already firmly in one camp or the other on a policy issue. At the state level, I would argue that this is even more true. Our legislators have minimal staff, they have small budgets, and they have and they get elected by smaller margins. And on many issues, they may not have a settled position. And so direct contact with constituents who maybe are not reaching out to them all the time can really help, particularly on issues where they're not already very knowledgeable, can help them to understand what's at stake and why their vote matters. So that brings up sort of an important issue here, the difference between advocacy and lobbying. How many of you are familiar with this difference? Who feels very confident that they know what lobbying is? Please feel free to raise your hand, add a balloon in Zoom, do whatever it is to indicate. Very good, Tamia. Hilda, I see you, both the hand and the celebration icon, which is my personal favorite Zoom icon. So actually, I'm going to ask if you feel comfortable, either Tamia or Hilda, do you want to just give a brief sense, just unmute and give a brief sense of your understanding? What's the difference between lobbying and advocacy?
Well, just as you indicated, to advocate is, you're passionate about it. You're gonna tell the people you've already received information. You have already received the talking points, the idea to go out and advocate. The lobbyist is the hard worker, I think. They go out and find the facts and go out there and get the information for us to be able to tell the people in my terms.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, that's an interesting distinction in terms of the level of knowledge or effort that goes into the policy details versus sort of broadly being passionate about an issue. There's an important distinction too in tax law between lobbying and advocacy, and often people in 501c3 nonprofit organizations think, well, look, I really can't lobby. I'm not allowed to go out and talk to my legislators, and that's not true. Lobbying is not advocacy. Well, lobbying is advocacy, but not all advocacy is lobbying. Can nonprofits lobby? Yes, they can, up to a limit. You can only spend about 20% of your resources on lobbying efforts. But lobbying is advocating for an elected official or an appointed official to take a specific action, a vote,
and it's broad.
On a particular bill.
It's a broad. You're not taking any sides. You're just giving facts for nonprofit.
No, Susan, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, no, you are absolutely allowed. Not 501c3s are allowed to give opinions and make statements on a particular issue up to a certain percentage of their resources.
Oh,
so as long as you're not spending more, if you have the H election, it's a little easier because that number is 20%. If you don't have the H election, you're subject to what they call those insubstantial part tests, which 20% is a good gauge in that field. The IRS has never really codified exactly what insubstantial means, but you can absolutely do that. And I like Danny's slide here with the grassroots, because there's another important distinction. If you are communicating with your members, it is not considered lobbying. So you could even tell your members a specific position to have and tell them to go forth, as long as they're members of your organization and it's an advancement of your organization's goals. It does not count as lobbying.
okay. So I'm just for a little clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. I knew that we can do something, but I thought we can only give the information generally. So good. Thank you. That's
so,
something.
And literally,
that's right. You can ask, unless you're spending. Susan, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say the IRS distinction, I think, Danny, is just what you're about to say, is only the amount of resources you spend specifically on lobbying. So for instance, I might be at the Capitol for 8 hours, but I only spend 3 minutes testifying in a committee, and that is all that counts toward my 20%. I could spend all day at the Capitol advocating till the cows come home and meeting with people and doing that work. It's only that time that I actually try to influence legislation that I charge to my 20%.
Thank you so much.
I want to underline another part of what Susan said, that it's only when you're influencing legislation, right? It's not if you have, let's say that you dedicate 50% of your staff time to educating legislators on what hunger looks like in your area. You're not asking them to take action. You're simply showing them what food insecurity looks like, what work you do, what challenges your community faces. It's only when you say, we need you to vote no on, HB 265, or we need you to vote yes on, SB 740 or whatever it is. When you're generating materials that support a direct ask, when you're in conversation with a legislator about a direct ask, that's lobbying. But when you're helping them to understand what's behind general issues that they're facing, that's advocacy, but it's not lobbying. And anyone can do it, and there's no restriction on the amount of time that you can spend simply conveying what your work is and what the lives are like of the people that you serve. And right now, when the legislature isn't in session, is a great time to engage in that work, just building relationships with legislators, helping them to understand what their constituents face on a daily basis.
And Danny, I'll just add the other side of that coin is, because you said legislation, if you are interacting with an agency and trying to get them to do something administratively, like opening up SNAP benefits or making it easier for folks to do that, that is not lobbying at all, because the IRS recognizes that it's only when you interact with the legislative branch, anything that has the force and effect of law, and policy decisions of an executive branch do not fall under there. Also, what doesn't fall under that in Louisiana is any local, like if you interact with the local school board or the local Metro Council, none of that counts as lobbying.
And the basic takeaway, if I can distill this to just like, what's the soundbite here? You can talk to these people. That is, there are, Lorna, I note that you work for an LSC funded organization. And so there are different restrictions that apply that I think your legal staff is probably well aware of. But unless you work for legal services, in which case I defer to your expertise on your own restrictions, you can call your represented, your elected officials. You can explain to them the work you do. You can invite them out to your site. You can talk to them from morning to night and without concern about your tax status. When you are lobbying them directly, asking them to take a position on a particular piece of legislation, you can still do that up to generally about 20% of your resources dedicated to that cause. A smaller number for grassroots lobbying. But I think for most organizations on this call that aren't primarily already advocacy organizations, you probably would be devoting a negligible percentage of your total organizational resources to lobbying in almost any circumstance. So consult with your CPA if you worry that you're getting close to 20% of all of your total organizational resources, or that you might be headed down that path. But the takeaway that I want to convey is that you can always educate our elected representatives on issues. There is no limit to the amount of advocacy that your organization can do. There are a variety of levels of engagement, but for the sake of time, I'm going to sort of speed through a couple of slides here. At the highest level, you can meet with elected officials, testify in front of a committee, and recruit people to advocate for themselves. You can also write letters to the editor in your local paper. You can invite legislators to visit your organization. You can submit public comments or attend a rally. And you can also engage in lower level advocacy, simply posting to social media about issues of interest or of relevance to the populations you serve, sharing information about an issue and calling your legislator's office. So who are your legislators? Well, you may know our senators and representatives fairly well. At the state level, our governor is John Bell Edwards. Lieutenant Governor is Billy Nungesser. We each have state representatives and senators and local officials that we see. We're going to focus together today on our representatives at the state level. So I'd like everybody to move out of the Zoom window for a minute. And if you don't already know who they are, we are going to take a moment to find your state legislators. So please go to legis.la.gov. legis.la.gov. Oh, I can use the chat box here.
Okay.
Once you're there, click on Who Are My Legislators? This is on the top left side of the screen. After you've clicked that button, enter your office address if we're advocating from an organizational perspective. It'll ask you for your Louisiana address information and click the Find button. And once you've done that, you should see who represents you in the Louisiana State House of Representatives and State Senate. as well as your representatives in Congress and in the Senate at the national level. So I'd like everybody just to take a note of who your legislators are. You should get information as well about how to contact them, where their district offices are. You might see a map of their district office. It's possible that some of them have offices very close to your own offices. I know for our friends at Disability Rights Louisiana in New Orleans, you occupy the same block as Representative Freeman's office, district office. So a great opportunity to connect there if you're not already connected. But knowing who your representative is particularly important, because now is the time to engage with state reps so that they know who you are. It's once session starts, your state representatives will have dozens and dozens of people coming to them with all manner of issues all throughout the legislative session. Right now, they probably still have a lot of people who are coming to engage with them, but now they're less busy than they will be come March or this year with the redistricting session come probably late February as well. And this is and engaging with your state representatives now is easier than you think. You can invite them to events. You can invite them to volunteer if your organization offers volunteer opportunities. You can invite them to tour your facility. This is a great tactic of food banks, showing representatives just the volume of work that they do and emphasizing that even with all of this work, state policy is still sorely needed to meet need. One thing that I would really advocate is using constituent services as an advocacy tool. What this means is that if you are working with a client who's having an issue, with a state agency, with a program, some problem that they're having difficulty solving, one tool available to you to both get your client's problem solved and to raise attention to these problems at a systemic level is to call your state representative and let them know that you need their help. Maybe they need to call a state agency. They could call, they could make inquiries to find out what's going on with your client's Medicaid case, for example, to find out what's going on with your client's SNAP case, why your client was cut off from WIC and doesn't understand why. Constituent services is a big part of their job, but it also helps them understand what issues their clients are facing on a day-to-day basis when they interact with state government. So engaging your representatives on that level, hey, how can you help me? I'm working with somebody who's facing this issue, can help them to understand when there are issues that may need to be addressed in policy as well. And the key here is to develop a relationship that builds over time. If you're inviting your representative to events, you're getting in touch with them whenever your agency has an announcement to make. If you develop a new tool, I'm going to very quickly thank Liz Mangum, who had to step off the call. When I sent out the SNAP deduction worksheet earlier today, she immediately responded and said, you need to send this to the legislative offices. This is an important tool for them in constituent outreach as well. The goal here is that your state representatives know you, know what you do, and that they've had some way of helping you or helping the people you serve, so that they're identified with those needs and with the needs that you help to address on a daily basis. So I wanted to sort of pause for a second and just ask for other tips from folks who are in the Capitol regularly or who have successfully engaged with their legislators. What have you found effective in your work with legislators? What tips would you have to share with everybody on the call or who might watch this recording later?
Don't wait for an event or a cause or whatever. Like we send holiday greetings, we send not necessarily gifts, just a call to say from NAUW, we are appreciating your work, or from Smile Community Action Agency, helping people, changing lives, sending little things from us so that when we speak to you, when we invite you to our facility, you will know who we are, and it's not just a one-time thing. Just a little tip. We communicate often. I
That's
call
a fantastic
them, but I'm on a different level.
Indeed. Susan?
Yeah, we found that Facebook is incredibly popular among members of the legislature and is overwhelmingly being used as an engagement tool with them. So, tagging them on messages and, friending them and bringing them into conversations is a really good way, because they spend a lot of time on Facebook and they are really kind of hyper worried about what people are saying about them on Facebook. So we've seen that as a really good tool.
Thanks for the tip, Susan. Alyssa?
Sure. One thing that we do is to bring a specific story or a person, a constituent for which the issue is related. Also, I feel like going in and knowing your ask or your pitch, or having something kind of specific is also helpful. And we like to leave some sort of infographic or something, just like one sheet of paper that is very colorful with not as many words, which I realize sounds a little condescending, but to kind of leave behind. And this is if we go in person.
Short, accessible text is always a good idea. Busy people like something that they can breeze over. Good. Other tips from folks who regularly interact with our legislators? Okay, well, I'll continue then to the next slide here. To advocate effectively, many of these will echo the tips that we just heard. You can lean on your experience and expertise. Talk about what you know. If you're unfamiliar or unused to talking to legislators, you can just tell them about the work you do. Again, the goal here is to build relationships, get to know them better and get them to know you better. For more specific issues, if you're advocating about a specific policy position, you can learn more about the issue or population at hand. You can be concise and specific and share, just as Alyssa said, data, fact sheets, and other easily accessible information. You can also effectively advocate by raising awareness, spreading the word among your networks for people to contact their legislators as well. The more voices that your legislators are hearing about an issue through Facebook, through calls to their district office, through direct emails, the more that they'll recognize that people are paying attention to their votes. You can engage stakeholders at all levels of the issue, from your clients to your board members, to other members of your community. You can work to align your voice with others, and you can always personalize the issue by presenting a clear example, a good narrative of something that you've experienced in your work that relates directly to what you're talking about. You can talk about why you do the work that you do, what keeps you going, and what's happening in your community that makes your work necessary. Alyssa, do you want to jump in?
Shoot. Sure. For what I wrote in the chat, or sure. My hand is still raised. I meant to lower that. I don't really.
Oh, well, you're welcome to share what you wrote in the chat as well.
Oh, I just put in the chat that we send over things that we think will be helpful. I think that Susan may have said that, or maybe you said that, but for us, we sent over a lot of things about pandemic EBT, school food changes, things that are very specific to their area that would be helpful for them to share. That way they also see us as a little bit of an expert and somewhere to go for if they need any information.
And I just want to lift up the hunger fact sheets that Jim shared in the chat box as well, as a very useful tool for everyone on the call to just grab quick facts to share with your legislators. So I'm looking at the clock and we're just out of time. So I think we're not going to do this exercise right now. But it's useful for the future to just practice a little bit, explaining in as clear and simple terms as you can what hunger looks like in your community, and why you work to combat hunger. So I want to thank everybody, and once again give great credit and gratitude to Feeding Louisiana for the work that they have put into designing this presentation and delivering it at their own member food banks over the course of many years. If as we move closer to the legislative session, it may be helpful for us to revisit some of these issues. So I'll be in touch with other folks on the list about possibly having a panel at one of our meetings on more detailed legislative advocacy tips. And I just want to remind everybody that the next month on December 2nd is the Louisiana Anti-Hunger Summit, which with Senator Fred Mills organized and pushed the Louisiana Department of Health to organize. This is going to be a fully virtual event, so it's going to be online. It's also on the day that's usually scheduled for our own Anti-Hunger Coalition meeting. I think we will likely just defer our coalition meeting in favor of encouraging everybody to attend the Anti-Hunger Summit. It should be a good opportunity for us, hopefully, to engage legislators who attend, but certainly to work toward a fuller anti-hunger agenda and more robust support for an anti-hunger agenda in Louisiana. Thanks, everybody, for all of your participation today. I'm going to stop sharing and stop recording. And